Okay. So, I just want to begin with the Buddha's victory verse there. So this is what he really had discovered was the fundamental problem. So he says, seeking but not finding the house builder. And he says he's been traveling through countless rebirths. It's just suffering to be born over and over again. So remember, the understanding of the age was that you would keep being reborn. Not everybody believed that. There were materialists, but there were various theories as to what happened in this process of reincarnation. Some said it was just driven by fate, but the Buddha said, of course, it was driven by our ethical behavior. Anyway, he found the deep cause of the whole problem. So this sense of self, the house builder, the view of self, the delusion of self. And then he says, you know, you're not going to do this to me again, and I've broken your rafters, and I've smashed up your ridgepole. And then he says, the unconditioned consciousness has been attained. Now the word here is chitta. And this tells us really that the Buddha has difficulty expressing what he found in the given language. The word, for instance, atta, meant an eternal soul. So even in Hinduism now, it refers to an eternal spirit or soul. And the Buddha, trying to find a word which did not give it any sense of substance, chose to say it was not self. And he confused everybody. Even the Jains said, we and the Brahmins, we believe in an atta. The materialists do not believe in an eternal soul. But the Buddhists have not made their minds up yet. So he created a lot of confusion, but that was his way of expressing something which is essentially inexpressible. Yes. In fact, there's a lovely discourse, I've forgotten the name of the person. So one of his disciples comes to him and says, look, is there a self or is there not a self? And the Buddha's silent, he doesn't say anything. And the man went away very confused. So when Ananda said to ask the Buddha, why didn't you explain something, say something? Well, if I had said there was no self, he would have put me in the category of annihilationists. If I had said there was a self, he would have put me in the category of the eternalists. But I didn't say anything to this disciple because it would have confused him even more. So you can see the Buddha has difficulties. And the reason I mention this is because of the word chitta. So it also means your heart mind. So in other words, all your emotional and thinking life, the mind. The mind, heart. Sometimes you'll see that in Buddhist literature. The writers will put heart, mind together.
Is it hyphenated? They put a hyphenated?
Yeah, with a hyphen. Now he says that he's discovered something which is not conditioned. So in other words, it cannot belong to the world of the heart-mind. And then he reinforces this by saying that he's destroyed all kinds of craving or wrong desire. So in that last sentence, he has expressed the whole of his teaching. That there is a transcendent, and that the way to the transcendent is through ethical behavior. This, you say mundo?
Transcendent word or transcendent? How would you translate?
You can't say, no, if you say mondo.
Il trascendente.
Basta.
Il La mia licenza poetica, scusa.
Yes.
My poetic license.
Yes, if you say world, then we're going somewhere.
We're back to square one.
Yes. Okay. So there we have the Buddha expressing his joy, really. So now there are various ways that this dependent origination is expressed through the scriptures, and it finally coalesced or came to this particular form. This is the final form of that teaching, and it begins with this word avijja. Now, it normally translated as ignorance, but this gives you the impression that somehow you should have known, and you made a mistake, but you should have known. But actually, the word means just don't know. And if we go back to that little image of a newborn baby, the baby doesn't know anything. So all the potential is there, but actually it knows nothing. Now, it's dependent on this that the first delusion arises, which is the self. So if you remember my story of Narcissus looking into the pond and seeing his face. So here we have, even in the baby, some sense of itself, even if it's only very, very minor. So remember that in the Kanda, the five aggregates, this consciousness is just a screen upon which everything appears. So the first thing to appear is a sense of me. So from that essential delusion, we begin to create our personalities, our characters. So these sankhara, again, remembering the five aggregates, is something that we personally create. So remember, from an action, if you continue doing the same action, then you have a habit. After you've collected so many habits, you have a personality, a character. And once you have a personality or character, you have your destiny. So obviously what we're trying to do is to become aware of our motivations. And in becoming aware of them, we can then begin to distinguish those we'd like to be rid of and those we want to develop. So these are your sankhara. I usually just translate that word as habits. But you'll get various writers, intentional activities. Some say concoctions. Come with the concoction.
Concoction. It's a mixture. It's a form of.
Yeah. Every writer tries to find a new way of expressing it. Otherwise, there's no point in them writing a book. So now, dependent on these sankharas, consciousness arises. Now, what it means is that the sankharas are being manifested somewhere for them to be known. Yes, and that's what we call here consciousness. These, Western words also have their own meaning, so it's quite difficult sometimes to be clear about what the Buddhist teaching is. But it's like, for instance, when you go when you're walking along the street and you pass a shop and you're interested in what's in the shop window, and you stop to look at the objects,
Vi fermate e guardate gli oggetti
and suddenly you catch yourself watching on the glass.
e tutto
So something like that. So now, of course, when that consciousness manifests, what appears on it is something of the body and mind. Yeah. So if there were no consciousness, then of course nothing would appear. Simple as that. Yeah. Now, one place that happens is when we're asleep, and because of the basis of our bodies and mind, we have these six sense spaces, and it's good to reflect that everything we know about the world and everything we know about ourselves is dependent on these six sense bases. So if a person is, so we say, colorblind, then he lives in a different visual world than most other people. And inwardly, like for instance, I know somebody who has no images in his mind. Yeah, he's very strange. He says when he thinks, he knows it's there, but there's never an image in the mind, and I've now met 2 or 3 people who when they close their eyes, don't see anything.
Yeah.
There's no image at all. Is there anybody here like that? I also met somebody who came to one of my courses who said he had no emotions. No, it was very strange. He said he knew when he was angry, he knew when he was happy, but there was no feeling content whatsoever. He'd done the rounds of psychotherapists and Dharma teachers, and nobody could explain it. So the world that we personally experience is dependent on our 6 sense base.
Base sensoriali.
Yeah, the 6th one, remember, is the heart minder. Now, everything that we experience is actually being modulated by the mind. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha says, Gautam knows it off by heart, and I've just wiped it off my phone, so I'm dependent. Yeah, that's right. The mind is chief. The mind is forerunner. Oh yeah, yes. Whoever acts with an impure mind, suffering will follow them. That's it. Like the wheels of a cart that follow. Can you get that?
Now on to the Italian.
Okay. So he says, the mind is the forerunner. It is chief. And if you do some harm, then if you do something immoral, harm will come to you, like the wheels of a cart, of a horse, of an ox cart, follows the ox. And it's the same for good actions, wholesome actions. But here he uses the image of a shadow which follows you. So even when you see at the ear, for instance, the only thing that the ear communicates from the outside world is a sense of pressure. It's the mind that turns it into a sound. And you can actually experience that in your meditation. When the light comes to the eye, it is really just like pixels. It's the mind that creates what you're looking at. So this is dependent, you see, dependent on this psychophysical organism. You have those 6 senses. And what we've discussed now is the next bit, which dependent on those 6 senses is your contact. Now that initial experience does not have any sense of pleasure or pain to it. It's completely neutral. We then put on some sort of distinguishment as to whether it's painful, pleasant, or neutral. And that's how we feel it. So
come la sentiamo.
So that's what I was saying with pain. At the level of direct perception, we experience it as something painful. But when we go into the pain and we see it's only a bit of heat, pressure, then it becomes completely neutral.
Neutro.
So that's the distinction between that contact and the feeling tone that we put on it.
Yeah.
So then we have this crucial moment where we form a relationship with it. There's the word tanha is a specific word which also has a meaning of thirst. And it's always something that you shouldn't have. There is another word for desire, which is chanda. You can have a good desire or a bad desire. But this tanha is the desire which comes out of the delusion of a self. And as we know, If we like something, we go towards it. If we don't like it, we move away from it. And the next step is this upadana. So the distinction between tanha and upadana is like a magnet. As the magnet is attracted to some metal, you can feel it's moving towards it. But when it goes, when it actually catches, that's it. That's the grasping. There are 4 types of that type of grasping, that holding, that tight holding. So it's around sensual pleasure, around views, opinions. So this is, I'm right, everybody else is wrong. And then there's a tightness around rules and regulations and ritual. All this will manifest somewhere within the upadana. But the main one is this belief in a personality of being me. What's that? As soon as we have me, we obviously have mine. We hold on to things, and we hold on to a sense of me, you see. So then, from that, we have the next point in the process where that desire now has to be activated. And the word here is bhava.
Bhava.
Bhava. Bhava means to become. It means to recreate oneself constantly. So there's not a single self. It feels like it. It feels as though I'm always me, but this sense of self is being recreated every moment. And you'll find some writers using the word selfing. Constantly. Seare.
So good. You should write a book.
Seare. Whoa. So, in that creation of a self, there's a power. Yes, we've had a desire, we've grasped it, and now it has to be empowered. And that's what we were really trying to understand with this eating process. So there's a lot happening at this point. There's that sense of me, want, must have, and the object. Everything is now activated. You cannot separate that power from what is actually being done. So if I want to ring the bell, I will create somebody who is now going to ring the bell. I think it's the same as the quality of force in physics. Yeah. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Such a physical.
Yeah. When you throw a stone into the air, you cannot separate the force from the stone. You can measure the force, you can measure the velocity, but you can't say, oh, well, this is the force and this is the stone as 2 different entities. Yeah, you can't separate it. But that's the same with the will. And that's why the Buddha says it's the will which is the action. And of course, once you initiate an action, that you can call the birth, and then there's the process, and then there's the end of it. Now, the Patiloma, coming back the other way, there are 2 points of escape from the suffering, the process of suffering. So the first is right at the beginning, this direct realization of the false nature of the self. And then the whole pack of cards just collapses. Now, when somebody has that sort of insight, is known as a stream entrant. It's the first level of the process of awakening. And from that point onwards, it's really not possible. It's impossible for that person to go back on that insight. And his process towards full liberation is assured. It's a bit like, when we reach the age of 7. 2 things happen to us at the age of 7, which is expressed in the story of Adam and Eve. There's the realization that you can do wrong things and the appearance of guilt. So remember, Adam and Eve ate the fruit of the tree of good and evil. And God was very upset. So he kicked them out of the Garden of Eden. In other words, that child cannot believe Father Christmas comes down the chimney anymore. See, so a reality comes to the 7-year-old which wasn't there before. A 3-5-year-old believes in what they can imagine.
Immaginare.
It's impossible once you've passed that insight, because that's your first, you could call it spiritual insight, to go back. If you do, they'll put you away. So right there, every time we experience that sense of not self, we're undermining that delusion. Now, every time that you are looking, feeling, experiencing what is happening inside you as an object, you're taking away from them that sense of self. So this sense of self is an identity. So for instance, if you bite your tongue, just for that moment, you and the tongue are one and the same thing. Just that sharpness of the pain, you disappear into the pain. You are the pain. That's identity. Then you jump out of identity and you're angry with yourself. So now you become an emotional self. And then when it all quietens down and you think, well, what did I do in my mouth to achieve that? So then I become a thinking self. When I, in meditation, have discovered this place of an observation post, looking, feeling, experiencing what's happening in the heart-mind, then I've created a self which is transcendent of the body, heart and mind. So transcendence simply means it's another type of identity. Unfortunately, we cannot go beyond that by an act of will. Now, you can't get rid of that self by an act of will. If you try and get rid of that self, you create another self that wants to get rid of that self. See? So, so what we have to do is keep coming back to that position, and at some point there will be a realization of the pure awareness. So now you will find eventually that there is a seeming contradiction in the definition of Nibbana. The contradiction exists in Theravada Buddhism, and it also exists in the Mahayana. So there is what's known as they call it a blackout. I don't know. Deep sleep. It's like deep, deep, deep sleep. Oh, blackout. Echo. Yeah. Hey, there is a blackout. But you have to explain it. So when somebody experiences this blackout, it's a peculiar thing, but their lives are changed. So I had a student who was on a boat going down what's the country that's Albania? It used to be Yugoslavia, down that coast, Croatia. The Adriatic coast.
Croatia?
Yeah, well, down that coast. Okay. Yeah, it'll do. And everybody came up to the boat to see the sunrise. So he was standing there with other people, and the sun was just appearing over the horizon. And then there was nothing. When he came back into consciousness, the sun had risen so far. And his life was completely changed. So there's something about that sort of experience which is insightful. It's as though, if we talk about the mind, it's as though something has happened subconsciously and has changed us. Now, this then is projected to the point where when somebody who is fully liberated dies, they go into that nirodha. Now, that's not very attractive. And when the Christian missionaries went out to, Sri Lanka, Burma, places like that, they just said, well, this was just an annihilation. See? Now, in the Mahayana, it's the teaching of Nagarjuna, the Madhyamika, some of you might know. Nagarjuna.
Nagarjuna.
Oh, Nichiguda.
Uno dei due.
Nagarjuna, who is really accepted as the probably the greatest metaphysical philosopher. So they also teach this Nirodha, this blackout. Now, there is another experience of pure awareness. When the awareness experiences itself as completely different from the body, mind and heart. This can happen inwardly,
No?
or it can happen outwardly. So a near-death experience, when somebody expresses that, they will say that their consciousness, this awareness, was up in the ceiling somewhere, looking down upon them. And when you ask them, well, what was it made of, or what was in it? Nothing. And this is the meaning, or one meaning, of emptiness that you get. The awareness is empty of everything it can be aware of. And you will get this teaching from the forest tradition of Thailand. Ajahn, you can get the writing of Ajahn Mahabua, even Ajahn Sumedho, all these people. Some of you might know Ajahn Sumedho, no? No. Okay. Yeah. So we have these, that's right. So in Mahayana, what happened was, let's start again. The Buddha was trying to express the experience of Nibbana. He was very wary of saying what it was that experienced Nibbana, because this would lean him towards saying a soul, a self. But there are two passages in the scriptures where he names it, you can say. The question that the person asks is, where does the world come to an end? And the Buddha says, no, this is the wrong question. Yeah, the question should be, where does the world not find a footing? So then he says, there is a consciousness which is not colored by any of the senses. And remember, that includes the heart and mind. Without boundary, and in all directions full of light. Just this is the end of suffering. So when the Mahayana developed through especially the teaching of Vasubandhu, he then began to describe this dependent origination in a transcendental way. Yeah, see. So if you now just take a single moment, shall we say. So here you have underneath our psychology this deep delusion and all our habits. They're all here. So then we are walking down the street and we see ice cream. So there's your first contact. And then with it there comes, or immediately afterwards, there comes like ice cream. And then there comes want what I like, which is the ice cream. And then there comes I want what I like, which is the ice cream. Now, this was a tremendous discovery by the Buddha, because we fool ourselves into thinking the I comes first. So it's I see the ice cream, I like ice cream, I want ice cream, I'm going to buy ice cream. Now that I is the moment of complete delusion. If it came first, how could there be an escape? Okay? It's because it comes last that there is an escape from that process. And that's the point of escape between feeling and desire. Between phassa, between vedana, feeling, and tanha. So there are 2 points of escape from suffering. And when we perceive that, at that moment, the pack of cards collapses every time we see it. Okay. So that's dependent origination, in so many words. I'll have to bring it up tomorrow night. I don't know what I've done there. It was the quote from Meichi Kiao. Oh, it might be here. No, that's not the one.
Una citazione.
Oh, what a shame. Okay, well, I'll bring it up. It's a quote from a nun who died in 1991, Meichi Kiao.
Meichi Kiao.
And her expression of how she experiences being fully liberated. Okay.
Sentito.
I'll bring it up tomorrow as a revision of dependent origination. I can only hope my words have been of some assistance. I have not caused greater confusion, and that by your careful investigation you will liberate yourself from all suffering sooner rather than later.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Grazie. So 1912, what's happened to the schedule?